Everything you read told you the same thing. Go silent, disappear, remove yourself completely from their world and wait for the absence to do what your presence could not. Pull back hard enough and long enough, and the avoidant nervous system will do what avoidant nervous systems apparently do: register the loss, miss what it had, come looking for what it cannot stop thinking about. So you did it, or you tried to do it, or you are currently doing it, phone face down, checking it face up, constructing the performance of someone who has moved on, while the interior runs a very different program entirely. And something feels off. Not because the strategy is not producing results fast enough, because something in you has always suspected that the strategy, as a strategy, is missing the actual point by a significant margin. That what is being recommended is another form of the same orientation. Your behaviour still organised around producing a specific response in them. Your silence, another word for watching. Your disappearance, another form of waiting. Which means you have not actually gone anywhere. You have just gone quiet while staying exactly in the same place. Here is what actually works. Not as a technique deployed in the direction of an outcome, as the genuine, internal, lived alternative to a strategy that was always, at its root, about them rather than about you. First, understand precisely why no contact fails with avoidance when it is executed as strategy rather than as genuine departure. The avoidance system is exquisitely sensitive to authenticity. This cannot be overstated. The nervous system that learned, in its most formative period, to read relational environments for threat, developed in the process a sensitivity to inauthenticity that operates below conscious thought. It does not process the other person's stated position or their performed behaviour primarily. It processes the frequency underneath, the quality of presence that exists behind whatever is being presented. Strategic no contact has a specific frequency. It is the frequency of someone who is absent in form and present in orientation, who has stopped reaching outward but is still organised inward around the same object, whose silence is not the silence of genuine self-return, but the silence of someone who has changed their behaviour without changing their centre of gravity. The avoidance system reads this, not as information gathered consciously and assessed rationally, as a quality felt in whatever interactions do occur, as the specific atmospheric texture of someone who is performing distance rather than inhabiting it, as, and this is the precise word for what the system detects, waiting. Waiting is not departure, it is pursuit in a different costume, and the system that was built to detect and respond to pursuit responds to the costume the same way it responds to the thing itself. By increasing distance, by confirming the narrative that said the relationship was correctly categorized as something requiring management. Strategic no contact does not disrupt the avoidance pattern. At the level where the pattern lives, in the nervous system's reading of the relational environment, it confirms it. What actually disrupts the pattern is something that cannot be executed as strategy, because the moment it becomes strategy, it ceases to be the thing. It is genuine reorientation. Not the performance of having moved on, the actual, internal, lived experience of a person who has, really, not performatively, redirected their centre of gravity from the relationship back to themselves. Who is not silent because silence is the recommended move. Who is not absent because absence creates attraction. Who is not doing anything in particular in relation to the avoidant, who has, in the most literal psychological sense, stopped relating to the avoidant as their primary orientation. This is not a technique that can be applied to a situation while leaving the situation in place at the centre of everything. It is a fundamental reorientation of what occupies the centre. And that reorientation does not happen because you decided it should. It happens through a specific process, through actual engagement with the interior that was compressed by the dynamic, through actual reinvestment in the life that was partly suspended by the occupation of loving someone whose capacity kept requiring more management than the relationship deserved. It happens through doing the things described in everything that follows, not as steps in a strategy, as the genuine work of returning to yourself. The first thing that actually works is radical investment in your own becoming, not as a thing to do while you wait, not as the healthy activity that demonstrates to the avoidant, if they happen to be observing, that you are thriving, as the actual primary occupation of your present energy. What were you before this relationship became your primary orientation? What were you interested in, engaged with, moving toward, building, exploring, before the management of this dynamic consumed the bandwidth that those things used to occupy? Not in the abstract, specifically, the actual pursuits, relationships, ambitions, areas of curiosity or creative engagement that were present in you before and that have been, in varying degrees, on hold. Return to them, not as a performance of returning, actually return, with the full weight of the attention and energy that was previously directed at the dynamic, now redirected at the things that are genuinely yours. This is not about becoming a more attractive version of yourself, though that is frequently a consequence. It is about reclaiming the parts of yourself that the dynamic asked you to suspend, the self that existed before the relationship, and that exists independently of whether any specific relationship is currently working, is the most honest and most durable version of you available. Getting back into contact with it, through the actual pursuit of the things it cares about, is not a strategy. It is the most straightforwardly self-respecting thing available to you. And it is, not incidentally, the thing the avoidance system has no defense against. Because genuine self-investment does not produce the frequency of waiting. It produces the frequency of actually being somewhere, actually occupied, actually present in your own life rather than in the orbit of someone else's unavailability. The second thing that actually works is processing the relationship honestly, rather than bypassing the processing. Strategic no contact tends to be deployed as a bypass. The relationship ended or paused or became untenable, and the recommended move is to go silent and redirect energy outward, which often functions as a way of not feeling the full weight of what happened, of staying busy and looking forward and keeping the grief at a comfortable arm's length while the strategy runs its course. This bypass does not serve you. Not because grief is sacred and must be fully experienced before life continues, but because unprocessed relational experience does not simply wait. It surfaces in how you approach the next connection, in the patterns you carry into subsequent relationships, in the specific anxieties and triggers and relational habits that unexamined loss tends to install. Processing means sitting with the actual experience of what happened, what the relationship provided, what it cost, what your own behaviour in the dynamic revealed about the patterns you bring, not as self-blame, but as honest inventory. What the avoidance behaviour revealed about what you need and what you will not organise yourself around in future connections. This processing is not passive. It is not wallowing. It is the active, honest engagement with experience that converts raw relational material into genuine self-knowledge. And genuine self-knowledge is what changes the pattern you bring to the next significant connection. The avoidant who encounters the person on the other side of genuine processing, who has done the honest work, who knows themselves more precisely, who has converted the experience into clarity rather than carrying it as unexamined wound, encounters someone fundamentally different from the person who entered the dynamic. That difference is not performed. It does not require the avoidance attention to exist. It exists because real work was done. And real work, embodied in a person, is the most genuinely compelling thing the avoidance system encounters. Because it is the evidence of someone who takes their own interior seriously enough to engage with it honestly. Third, change the actual question you are asking. The question that most no-contact frameworks are organised around is some version of, will this work? Will the silence produce the return? Will the distance generate the recognition? Will the strategy accomplish the goal? The goal, in these formulations, is always some version of getting them back, of producing a specific response in the avoidant that changes the dynamic in the desired direction. This question keeps you organised around the avoidant, even when you are not contacting them. even when you are doing the healthy activities and investing in your own life. If the investment is in service of the goal of getting them back, if the becoming is being done for the return it might produce, rather than for itself, the center of gravity has not actually shifted. The orientation has not changed. The frequency is still the frequency of someone whose primary occupation is the relationship that is not currently functioning. The question that actually serves you, and that, as a consequence of serving you, is more likely to produce genuine movement in the dynamic, if movement is possible, is different. What do I actually want for my life? Not what do I want to happen with this specific person. What do I want for the actual ongoing, lived experience of my existence, independent of whether this relationship resolves in any particular direction? What kind of relationship do I want to be in? What do I need from an intimate partnership to feel genuinely met rather than perpetually reaching? What am I willing to invest in, and what am I no longer willing to organize myself around? What does a life look like in which I am genuinely flourishing rather than managing? These questions, engaged with honestly and for their own sake, produce the reorientation that strategic no contact only performs. And the reorientation, once genuine, changes everything about how you exist in relation to the avoidant dynamic. Not because you planned it to, but because people who are genuinely occupied with the question of their own flourishing simply do not have the same quality of orientation towards someone else's unavailability. The fourth thing, and this one will be uncomfortable to hear, which is the specific reason it is worth saying. Be honest about what you want from the relationship, should it resume. Most no-contact frameworks implicitly assume that the goal is restoration of the previous dynamic, getting back to where things were before the distance or the ending, or whatever the precipitating event was. But where things were before is the place that produced the current situation, and returning to it without addressing what produced it is not reunion, it is repetition. If what you actually want is the relationship in a form that is genuinely different from what it was, more reciprocal, more present, more capable of holding the closeness you offered without producing the withdrawal cycle that made closeness feel unsafe, then that form does not exist yet. It would need to be built. And the building would require things from both of you that the previous dynamic did not require. From the avoidant, genuine engagement with the pattern at the level where the pattern lives, not the intellectual understanding of it, which many avoidants have in abundance, and which does not by itself change the nervous system's behaviour. The embodied, sustained, supported work of examining the original wound, grieving what the early architecture cost, and developing the actual capacity to tolerate closeness at the level the relationship deserves. From you, clarity about what you need that you can hold even in the face of their return, their warmth, the specific relief of their presence after its absence, the ability to receive them without immediately abandoning the self-knowledge that the absence produced, the willingness to articulate what would need to be different and to mean it, not as an ultimatum deployed from strategy, but as the genuine, self-respecting statement of someone who knows their own requirements. If you cannot hold your own requirements in the face of their return, if the warmth of their presence reliably overrides the knowledge of what the dynamic costs, then the no-contact strategy is not the thing that needs changing. The relationship to your own needs is the thing that needs changing. Fifth, develop genuine tolerance for not knowing. One of the primary functions that strategic no-contact serves, that the monitoring and the strategy and the framework following serves, is the management of uncertainty. Not knowing what the avoidant is thinking. Not knowing whether the silence is registering. Not knowing whether the relationship has any future, or whether the investment of the previous period was simply over. Not knowing is uncomfortable. For most people who have been through an avoidant dynamic, whose nervous system spent the relationship in a sustained state of uncertainty monitoring, trying to read signals and decode silence and determine the current temperature, the continuation of that uncertainty in the aftermath feels intolerable. The strategy is, in part, a way of doing something in the face of not knowing, of having a plan, of converting the uncertainty into a manageable project. But the uncertainty is real, and the management of it is costly. What actually serves you is not a strategy for resolving the uncertainty, but the development of genuine tolerance for it. The capacity to not know what is happening on their side, what they are thinking, whether return is coming, and to continue living, actually living, rather than managing, regardless. This tolerance cannot be manufactured. It develops through the practice of repeatedly choosing to redirect attention from the uncertain thing toward the certain things, toward the work in front of you, the people who are present, the life that is ongoing. Not once as a decision, but repeatedly as a practice, every time the attention drifts back to the monitoring. Over time, this practice produces something that strategy never produces: actual equanimity. The real kind, not the performed kind. The kind that exists not because you have convinced yourself not to care, but because you have built, through the redirecting practice, a center of gravity substantial enough to hold you steady while the uncertain thing remains uncertain. That equanimity, genuine, unperformed, felt in how you actually occupy the present rather than how you describe your orientation to it, is the thing the avoidant has never encountered in someone they affected this much. And encountering it produces something in the avoidant system that no strategy can produce. The specific, destabilizing recognition that you are actually okay. Not performing okay, actually okay. Thriving in a direction that does not require their participation. Present in your own life with a quality of genuine investment that has nothing to do with what they do next. That recognition is the most compelling thing available, not because you designed it to be, because it is the evidence, embodied, that you are the specific person described throughout this entire series, the self-possessed, genuinely occupied, not organized around them person that the avoidant system cannot defend against. You became that person not through strategy, through doing the actual work. So what is the alternative to no contact, stated plainly? It is full contact with yourself. The deliberate, ongoing, genuinely motivated turning of the attention and energy and care that was directed outward, back to the interior, to the life that is yours, to the person you are when you are not arranged around someone else's capacity, to the becoming that was always possible and that the relationship's demands had partially suspended. This is not the same as forgetting, not the same as not caring, not the same as having successfully moved on in the clean, narrative way that healing is often falsely described as arriving at. It is the genuine, imperfect, ongoing choice to make yourself the primary occupation of your own life. To treat your own flourishing as the project that deserves the quality of attention and investment that was previously available only to the management of this dynamic. The avoidant is a secondary consequence of this choice, not the target of it, not the reason for it, not the audience it performs for. If the choice produces movement in the dynamic, if the genuine self-return that you undertake for your own sake produces in the avoidant the recognition that something has changed, that the person they knew is now someone who cannot be managed at the previous distance, that is a consequence, worth knowing about, worth being clear-eyed about if and when it arrives. But it is not the point. You are the point. Your life, your interior, your capacity for love brought somewhere it can land. Your becoming, continuous and specific and entirely yours, regardless of what any particular person does with the opportunity of your presence. That becoming does not require their return to proceed. It only requires you. And you have always been the thing you were waiting for, not the silence, not the strategy, not the technique that would finally make them see. You, fully, actually, genuinely return to yourself. That is what works. Not because it is designed to, because it is true.